an increasing number of intelligent applications around the world. And so through the combination of big compute, AI innovation that we open up to the entire world, and our access, privileged access sometimes, to massive data, we're just seeing a tremendous foundation for the future. And so I hope I've convinced you that there's just amazing potential in artificial intelligence, and that much of the excitement, and sometimes, to be honest, much of the hype around AI is well justified. And if I haven't convinced you, I think the rest of the lectures that you'll hear today hopefully will do a better job than I can do. But I wanted to get back then to this question about this idea of artisanal AI. And basically the idea of artisanal AI is that we are not in a situation yet, we haven't reached the point where we have an industrialized process or an industrialized technology for AI. Instead, we depend on highly skilled craftsmen, artisans, to create the AI-infused solutions for any kind of application around the world. And that has created a bottleneck. It has limited access to the good benefits of AI. And what do I think needs to happen? Well, I'd like to point to another example of fine craftsmanship and artisanal works from China. And in the 11th century in China, there was very inventive work on what is called movable type, on printing presses that have, in this case, ceramic type blocks. The invention and use of movable type in China in the 11th century enabled the possibility to have a much wider spread of access to books, because you could create these complicated wood blocks of text and then print at amazing speed, at least amazing speed for the 11th century time period. And it was a very important democratizing force for China at the time. And it brings up the point that when we talk about artisanal works and we talk about fine craftsmanship, even in the arts, there's an interplay between artisanal works and technology. Oftentimes, artisanal works result in the desire for new technology, in this case, the technology of movable type. And movable type and new technology creates new possibilities for craftsmanship. About 400 years later, in Europe, the concept of movable type also appeared. In this case, not using ceramic type blocks, but using metal type blocks. And this was done around 1452 in Germany by a man named Johannes Gutenberg. This is an important development because in Europe, owing to the fact that movable type can do printing very, very efficiently, but also because of the fact that there's a very limited alphabet. So the number of distinct type blocks that are needed is very small. This enabled an explosion in access to books. And in fact, oftentimes today, the printing of the Gutenberg Bible, which is the first major book printed on the technology of mass-produced movable type, is credited with sparking a new era of enlightenment and laying the foundations for the Renaissance. And in fact, we can see the connection to technology here. Here I'm showing a graph of an exponential growth curve. And for anyone in the technology field, this is a very familiar graph. We live and breathe exponential growth all the time. The concept of Moore's law for silicon scaling, for example, is depicted through this exponential growth curve. The spread of information in social networks is oftentimes depicted in terms of an exponential growth curve. But even in the medieval times, in the mid-1400s, we saw this type of exponential growth. Historians estimate that in 1450, in all of Europe, there were about 30,000 books.